validation, now I validate myself. Building inner strength, putting doubt up on the shelf. No more unnecessary drama, no more wasted time. Climbing higher constantly, making my own climb. Standing on higher ground, where excellence is found. My potential knows no bounds. Raising the bar, breaking ground. My network is my net worth. Choose your company wise. Surround yourself with eagles, not with sheep in disguise. Every interaction is a reflection of my brand. Quality over quantity, that's my personal command. Standing on higher ground, where excellence is found. My potential knows no bounds. Raising the bar, breaking ground. Whoa. I'm not just living, I'm manifesting my vision. Cutting through limitations with surgical precision. My expectations are my compass, my respect is my shield. To mediocrity and chaos, I will never yield. I'm not just living, I'm manifesting my vision. Cutting through limitations with surgical precision. My expectations are my compass, my respect is my shield. To mediocrity and chaos, I will never yield. Standing on higher ground, where excellence is found. My potential knows no bounds. Raising the bar, breaking ground. I'm not just living, I'm manifesting my vision. Cutting through limitations with surgical precision. My expectations are my compass, my respect is my shield. To mediocrity and chaos, I will never yield.
How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to This and That. I'm your host, Xander, where we talk about this, that, and everything in between. We got us a pretty straight up show tonight. I told you guys that I was going to do this on, I do believe, Monday, because we had one of the fans that was talking to me about this particular topic. Make sure that you guys like and subscribe. For those of you that want to jump in and put your 2 cents in, by all means, you can click the link that's going into the comment section right now. If you do so, approve the mic, approve the camera, brings you into the green room. I see you swiveling around in the green room. I bring you onto the show in real time. Then we can get here and talk about the topic at hand. Otherwise, because you have to be over the age of 18 and dive into the podcast through the green room as a guest. So if you're not over the age of 18, you're still allowed to be here. We're open-minded, open forum, educational. We like to provide you guys with knowledge about this, that, and everything in between. So if you aren't over the age of 18, you just leave your comments in the comment section. As long as your comments maintain a level of appropriateness, we have no problem with allowing comments that we don't agree with to be into the comment section, because everybody has their right to make their own individual opinions. However, you just got to verbalize them in an appropriate fashion. Now, remember, we're live 7 nights a week. We typically don't let the sun rise without us going live at least once, if not more than once. Also, remember that in addition to that, we typically start at about 10:30-ish Central Standard Time, 11:30-ish Eastern Standard Time. Today we started a tad bit later than normal because, well, it's about the same, but we started a tad bit later than what we wanted to start because just when I was getting ready to pull up the platform, StreamYard started giving us a little bit of issue. So had to reboot the whole computer to make sure that we got rid of the bugs so that we wouldn't have any difficulties with the live. I always delay the live to make sure that there are no internet problems or other platform issues that interferes with our ability to stay live once we go live, because once you're live, like whatever happens, and everybody gets to see all the failures behind the scenes. So you can't edit out technical difficulties. Now, we got a good lineup because I said we are live 7 nights a week. We got a good lineup. Tomorrow, Sunday, is our members only. So any questions and comments from the fans, we're going to be taking that into account. Special shout out to Red Void, Omni81, Liberty Twitcher, Maxer Poser, Mr. Pibbs, as some of many, including Reese Martinez, that have shown us some love on the podcast. We greatly appreciate you guys. Extra special shout out to Crescify and Happy Oli for the pets. We just did another one from Immunity Blend where the probiotics for the pets. So special shout out to those guys. Monday, we're going to be talking about the acquisition of Canada from the United States. I'm going to be going into detail about that, what happened with that, touching base on whether or not the fire has completely been subsided, because I understand that they have gotten it contained, but for some reason it's still burning month later. 2 months later. So I'm going to go back and confirm exactly how much fire is left, if I can, and then what is the full totality of devastation as far as the California fires. People have moved on from the California fires because wherever it is contained at this point, it is not in an overly populated area, so it's no longer dangerous to the general population. I'm going to be double checking between tonight and tomorrow about the progress of TikTok to make sure that US is acquisitioning TikTok as well. They have already had battles in the United States government about the naming of the Gulf of America. So those of us that have already officially accepted it as the Gulf of America, kudos to you. Those of us that are refusing to change, and we're going to continue to identifying it as the Gulf of Mexico, take it to your grave. Understandably, we're also going to be addressing some things because I hear that the president got pissed off at the representative of Maine for his enforcement of the two-gender rule and not having males in or not having females in male sports. So we're going to be going into that in detail as well. We'll be seeing how that goes, because specifically the reason why I'm talking about it, not because I care less about whether or not females are in male sports, but because he specifically said that if she doesn't exercise the executive order or execute the executive order as he expected her to do, he would not fund Maine. So Maine would no longer receive government funding if the leadership of Maine defies the orders from the president. She threatened to sue the man, see him in court. I was sitting over here thinking, didn't this dude just jump bail for like a few hundred? Not a few hundred. It was like 30 something federal level charges that was against him. He got convicted for a lot of it, but the whole case got thrown out because he was running for president a second time. That's my expectation as to why it got thrown out. But truthfully, they claimed that the utilization of documentation was misappropriated and somebody didn't follow proper procedure, and as a result, the case had to be thrown out. And I mean, the improper procedure is how felons get off of certain cases. So I can clearly understand that. However, it is a misdirection of sorts to see people believe that, if I can't make you do what I want you to do, that, I'm going to go to somebody and force them to force a billionaire to comply and cooperate. That's not how life works. Especially in a capitalist country. In a capitalist country, money talks. So a billionaire could offer somebody $1 million to shut up and go sit down somewhere, and they will agree with that billionaire. The rest of us, we can't persuade people like that. A billionaire can give a $500,000 yacht to somebody that he doesn't want or need anymore as a gift, and they'll leave that billionaire alone. The rest of us don't have it like that. So, we're going to be talking about that coming soon as well. We do have some money-making discussions on Tuesday we're going to be talking about, and we're going to be talking about other countries that are awesome to go live at, visit, and invest in on Wednesday. So as we get started with today's show, I want you guys to entertain this topic, because we're going to be talking about the fact that dads have this uphill battle in their child custody cases, specifically because one of the fans had challenged me on this because he had some concepts that were misinformed. So as we dive into this tough world of child custody fights, we're going to see how bad off men really have it with this uphill battle they face. Child custody battles, we've heard the horror stories about. These are bitter fighting, the endless court appearances, and emotional tolls it takes on everyone involved, not just the children and not just the parents either. But have you ever stopped to think if men are at a disadvantage when it comes to securing custody of their children? I would say that men are starting to recognize that, or always knew about it, but now the men are really standing up and speaking out on it. But I think that it's not universally accepted that the men are disenfranchised in family courts. But today we're going to explore this question. Historically, women have been seen as primary caregivers, as this stereotype still holds sway in many parts of society. As a result, men may face an uphill battle when it comes to convincing courts that they're capable of being the primary caregiver. But it's not just societal basis. The legal system itself can be stacked against men. In many jurisdictions, the law presumes that the mother is the more suitable parent unless proven otherwise. And we have gone over this on the show more than once, that statistics have proven that that is not the case, that men are more qualifiable to teach the children because the children's development of logic and reason is more effectively utilized in their adulthoods than emotional manipulation that they're statistically experiencing from the mother figures. Now, this isn't taking shots at women, but this is just true fact. One of the things we want to address, though, is that approximately 20.1% of custodial parents are fathers. And this represents an increase from the 16% in 1994. So we've only had a 4.1% increase, indicating a gradual trend towards more fathers gaining custody. Out of the estimated 12.9 million custodial parents in the United States, only 2.59 million are actually fathers. This would include the male-male relationships and female-female relationships across the board. This bias can manifest in many ways. For instance, mothers are often seen as more nurturing and emotional and more capable of providing stable environments for their children. Fathers, on the other hand, are often regulated as the role of breadwinner, and their parenting skills are somewhat viewed as inferior. And since the fathers are typically experiencing the expectation of being the breadwinner, usually the woman receives possession of the child and the man ends up getting the bill, which isn't right. It isn't fair. We've experienced in recent times that Donald Trump imposed some laws related to the claiming of the children on taxes, where the fathers are now able to, if they are paying taxes on the children, will be able to receive tax deductions because they're paying for the taxes, which will aid the fathers in having the capabilities to provide funding to the mothers or guardians of the children in a more effective fashion, because instead of them dumping all of their money on taxes after they dump all their money on the possession of the child, they get some deductions and rebates back off of the child custody. And then the money that they get back off of the child custody can go to the mother, because you've got to think about it. It's a double standard. If she's getting money from dad and then she's getting money from the U.S. government, and then dad's got to pay the U.S. government, she's getting paid twice. So with the executive order that got handed out, now if he's paying for child support, then he can claim his kid on the taxes. Now, there are some laws that there are some speculations there, where some people have been told that the women are not going to be able to claim the kids on taxes if the father's claiming kids on taxes. That's not necessarily true. The thing is that what happened was the men will be able to claim too. So while there will be substantial portion of collectiveness that she will be able to get for being in possession of the child, because the child is his dependent, even though the child doesn't live with him, because he's paying for the child, he can claim his expenditures on the child on his taxes, which will then give him some type of financial relief. So that was what the difference is on that. I know that we have been dealing with this discussion about, on social media, the president doing an executive order about getting rid of the 50-50 divorce laws. But I just want to give you guys confirmation that as of the 22nd of 2025, February 22nd, 2025, I still do not see any evidence that Trump has altered U.S. divorce laws since taking office in January of 2020. There's no information that lists any executive orders related to divorce laws among the 70 that he signed so far. So it is important to note that divorce laws in the United States vary by state, and only 9 states follow the community property system, where material assets are typically divided equally 50-50 in a divorce, and the other 41 states use equitable distribution, which aims for a fair but not necessarily equal division of assets. So the false claim about Trump changing divorce laws appears to have originated from some social media posts and unreliable sources. So these posts misrepresented Trump's actions and fabricated quotes attributed to him. So the reputable news sources and government websites that I've been able to have some access to have not confirmed any changes on those divorce laws. So make sure that you guys pay attention when you're listening to a lot of those issues that are popping up on social media, where people are using Donald Trump's voice as a voiceover, or people are using Donald Trump's political political interviews as background videos for voiceovers, where they're misrepresenting his actions and behaviors. And we have to understand that AI makes it so much easier for you to make it look like he's saying something that he's actually not saying. And they do it for clickbait. Usman says the tie always matches. Well, I did tell you. So I've got the red. I was debating between orange and green, because there's hints of green and brown. And I know that I wanted to do the red with a little bit of brown. So I got the greenish brown shirt that's kind of got it. It's actually like almost a plaid, but it's supposed to emphasize a little bit of a greenish brown background look, which emphasizes more of the brownish green in the tie, and then the red goes with the vest. I did say I match all of my outfits to my ties. I wasn't lying about that. So every day since you started coming to the show a little over a week ago, I have done it differently, some kind of way. I'm going through the wardrobe. I got to tell you, go through the whole wardrobe. I'm doing something different every time I come to the podcast, but I'm always in a suit. You've never seen me throwback t-shirt. You've never seen me like hood rich or anything, outside of if I ever promo somebody's clothing line where they give me a t-shirt and I wear the t-shirt. That's probably the only time that you'll see me do that. Or if I'm wearing my own clothing line, because This and That does have shirts and hoodies and stuff to that effect in the descriptions. I don't know if they're in today's descriptions, but there should be. And if they're not, you can click some of the links on the channel. That'll take you to one of the 2 stores that sells all the hoodies and shirts and aprons and hats and necklaces and dog pillows and everything else that you want that has This and That's logo all over it, to support the podcast. That's probably the only time you're not going to see me in a suit. Outside of that, 100% of the time, outside of being in bed, because I don't have a bed suit. But if they did make a bed suit, if there were pajamas that look like a 3-piece suit, I'd probably be wearing them. Just because. So we had some guys that came up and they were talking to us earlier this week about the lawyers. I mean, not the lawyers, the judges that were supposed to be in family law, and how they were supposed to be like 30% of them were women. 30% of judges in family law were women. So real quick, I'm going to debunk some of that before I continue through with the rest of this interesting conversation. First and foremost, there are approximately, let's see, hold on. We are in, there are approximately 34% of women across the country. So I actually stuck it in the conversation. So I'm not on that portion, but I'm going to talk about it right now. So here we are. So we're going to have to bounce around here. So in the United States, there's about 34% of active United States trial judges that are women, not just family law judges. Now, clearly, we're going to see probably a lot more females in the family law courts than some other courts, but it is not universally more women than men in family law. It depends on certain counties, because I have found certain states that have certain counties that have 8 male judges, 2 female judges, but there's also certain counties, as I have found in Florida, where This and That originates from. So this podcast originates out of Florida, where there's about 16 juvenile judges in Florida. And out of those 16 judges, we've got more than half of them are women. You have 6 juvenile judges in Hillsborough County alone, and out of those 6, 4 of them are women. Then you have 8 in Dade County. Out of the 8 that are in Dade County, 8 judges in Dade County, 6 of them are women. So more often than not, you're going to find about 3 out of 4 cases you're going to have a female judge. However, ladies, don't think that is the problem. That's not the problem. That just puts because we have a lot more female presence in the courtroom. We've got female bailiffs, we've got female clergies, we got female judges, we got female lawyers. And in a family court scenario, the motivation, which is what we're talking about on the show today, that pushes a man to quitting his fight for his kids, is that he's in a room full of women more often than not with unfavorable results. Not because the judge is ruling against him because he's a man, not because the judge is ruling against him because she's a woman, because he's in an uphill battle. This is traditionally across the board. Men are in an uphill battle just because they're men, not because of the judge, because historically and traditionally in the United States, the family law system has put the children with the mother. Very rarely do they put the children with the father. They usually have to deem the mother unfit in order for the father to get the child. But if the mother isn't deemed unfit, the father is forced to share the child. In some cases, when the mother is not available, the child is given to another woman, and the biological father and the biological father's parents are not allowed to have access to the child. And that's some of the things that you've seen in Florida, where families And it's not just in Florida, but it's in other areas, including Florida, where families are suing the state of Florida. Is why I'm mentioning it, because other states aren't having this many lawsuits. But the state of Florida, there's a lot of lawsuits out there about the fathers and the family members, grandparents, aunts, uncles, where the children were given away and the state never returned the kids to the parents. We have situations where there's a claim that when men fight for custody, that they might win custody 60% of the time, but that source has been unvalidated, because when both parents are fighting for custody, you find that the father does not win 93% of the time. He doesn't win. So that's a misconception. The progress is being made more balanced towards men over time, but as we go through today's show, we'll be able to discuss how the fathers are granted custody less than 18.3% of the time, according to some of the sources. Far less. And it's not necessarily like a ruling from the judge. And that's what I was actually about to get into. So let me go back and dive into all of those statistics so that we can start talking about the issue that we're having, because when we start talking about the relationships of adults, and the women are complaining about the behaviors of men because the men were traumatized or mistreated or had poor upbringings, you have to understand that the women raised the men to not be what the women are satisfied with. The men did not have the opportunity to raise the men. If the men would have had the opportunity to raise the men would probably be more satisfactory to the women's expectations. First person accountability, specifically because of this topic where men are not getting their children. So as I told you, out of 12.9 million custodial parents, only 2.59 million of them are fathers. So you're talking about children from like 10 million people, 10 million or 10,400,000 people got kids, though, and the kids aren't being raised correctly. So this is the single family home. This isn't the unified front where everybody stays together for the sake of the kids until they're grown. This is the broken home scenario. So almost 11 million families where the men have no say in the child's upbringing. And we were just about to talk when Usman was talking about the awesomeness of the tie matching the outfit. The basis is manifesting in multiple different ways. For instance, there are mothers that are often seen as more nurturing and emotional, like I was talking about before. But the fathers being determined as breadwinners, they typically put the fathers on child support, and then they typically give the custody to the mothers. Now, a father's rights to parent the child are typically, which is why we're having a lot more lawsuits coming about, the father's parental rights are being violated by the state, not just the mother. So this isn't even a show that's going to be going after the women. The country deprives certain Americans of their rights, not because of their skin color. And you can tack it in with social inequality, because there partially it's going to be because of your financial status, because if you could afford 5 lawyers or 10 lawyers in the courtroom, between the 5 or 10 lawyers you probably will walk away with your kid. But if you've got a court appointed attorney, you're probably going to be less successful with acquiring custody. And if you're self-represented, you're far less likely to be successful unless you do a lot of research and really present yourself in appropriate fashion. Now, one of the ways that we're looking at the father's rights to parent the child being violated is unwarranted interference by state agents, where parents have substantive due process rights to family relationships free from the unwarranted state interference. And it doesn't happen that way. The state usually interferes with visitation. They interfere with the appointments. They don't provide transportation to the court-ordered engagements where the children don't show up. Then the fathers are in court with multiple motions trying to get the court to take action against the state because the child is not there, but it causes the father to drag out 8, 10, sometimes even longer years in a custody battle, because unlike in civil court, where if one party doesn't cooperate, the judge rules in the favor of the cooperating party, the non-cooperating party is the state of Florida, represented by a judge that represents the laws in the state of Florida. So the state can delay the resolution of due process, which violates the father's Fourth Amendment right to reasonable due process, because they don't want to allow the father to gain possession of the child for whatever biased reason. They have failure to prove unfitness, where the government should not interfere with the parental rights unless and until a parent is proven unfit. Some situations, the father is never even given the opportunity to be deemed unfit. They have disregarding parental fitness, where some courts apply best interest of child tests without first making the required constitutional findings of a parent's unfitness. And in this situation, they make broad statements like, oh, it's in the child's best interest that the father not pick the child up from school for visitation or something to that effect, where they make it seem like the father's involvement and engagement in the child's life is in some way, shape, or form not in the child's best interest, when in most states for the last 100 to 200 years, the laws have dictated that both parents, until a decision has been made, is entitled to full custody or joint custody of the child, where they're supposed to share the child 50-50 until full custody has been determined, if there's going to be a full custody ruling. So that's a interesting concept. They have improper custody decisions, where courts may violate parents' due process rights by making custody decisions without considering parental fitness. Usman said there are YouTube clips of fathers getting interviewed outside of family court. They look defeated. Bro, men are beat down by society everywhere. This is one of the reasons why we encourage the women, if they want to have high value men, is that they are supposed to build their men up at the house so that their men have the skill set to run back out there and fight the world again. Because if the man is being beat down by society so much that their willingness to continue is almost gone. You have some that just completely give up. They just wrap it up. They try to rationalize it and reason with it and say, look, it's done. It's over. Especially when you started when the children were children, single digits, and now they're teenagers, 14, 16, 17, almost 18. They've been fighting since the child was in diapers, and no resolution has occurred, and the father does not have any access to his kid, and nobody's cooperating. The courts are supposed to be neutral and non-biased. The process is supposed to be neutral and non-biased. It is supposed to be reasonably fair. Both parents are supposed to have the opportunity to parent the child. They're supposed to have the opportunity to make decisions on the child. They're supposed to have the opportunity to impact the child. Then the court is supposed to be able to observe those decision-making skills and observe the results of those decision-making skills, and then decide if the parent is qualifiable to parent the child. But in a lot of situations, the court never allows the father to parent the child, never allows the father access to the child, and then continues to threaten to terminate the father's parental rights. And the fathers can only continue to go to court, pay for lawyers, miss days from work, rearrange his schedule for all of the court-ordered obligations, and he's putting more effort into claiming custody of his kid than a DUI recovering from probation. You see what I'm saying? It's crazy. It's crazy. Because think about, you have more appointments with the court for family court, more lawyer fees, more court calls, more days off from work than what you have with the random drug test that you have to pay for, breathalyzer in your car, and check in with your probation officer a couple times a month. And depending on the magnitude of the provision of services, the court typically requires parents who are supposed to be active in the child's life to start showing up weekly, sometimes multiple times a week, weekly, which means that you got to take a couple days off a week. And since the state only operates from Monday to Friday, you got to take a couple of days off a week during the week to do whatever the state wants you to do whenever the state wants you to do it, because they're only going to come when they're available, not when you're available. They're not going to do it on the weekend if you're off on the weekend. If you're off on the weekend and you work during the week, you got to take off 1 or 2 days during the week, which negatively impacts your income. Then you have to offset that by putting in extra work somewhere else so that you can continue to show a stable income to be able to continue to qualify for visitation, not even permanency. You're not even getting guaranteed the right to custody. You are showing all of this information to prove the right to engage your child in a court-ordered engagement that they're not even allowing you to engage your child in. It's horrible. So yeah, the men are defeated. It's worse than Murray when the men find out that they're not the father and they've been raising this child for 3, 4, 5 years and the child ain't his. Yeah, the men are just otherwise defeated. And it is horrible because a lot of the times, so we understand that when you do something wrong, you end up in criminal court. So while you can feel bad about the situation that you're in, you brought that on yourself. Your bad choices led you to be into this courtroom. But when it comes down to family law, this is one of those rare occasions where you don't have to do something wrong outside of unprotected sex. That's probably the only mistake you made, if you want to call that a mistake. You've got this life here. You want it. You want to take care of it. You want to bring it home. You want to build a life with it. They won't let you do it. And their only excuse is you're a man. It makes no sense. You don't have to do anything wrong to lose possession of your child as a man. Women have to be deemed unfit. Men just have to stay in it until the court recognizes that he's supposed to have his kid a long time ago. But mom has to be deemed unfit. Dad doesn't have to be deemed unfit. Dad just doesn't get his kid. And that's one of the worst things about the legal system in this country. Now, there are there's like 20,000 judges across the world, 12,000 of them in the United States, and 34% of them are women. And that's the reason why we started the show, was to debunk the myth that one of the fans said on the show that family court consists of 34% female judges. It does not. Some states, there are more male judges than female judges. In some states, there are more female judges than male judges. And usually the men rule in favor of the females because of the traditional hierarchy. Before there were female judges, there were only male judges back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, when the court was always ruling in favor of the women. So it's not because we have female judges, but the feeling of defeat that a man has today, even though the female judge might rule 60% more in favor of neutral and rational decisions, the father is going to feel defeated every time he comes to court because he's the only man in the room. He's the only man in the room. No other person is advocating for the father. The caseworker's not doing it. The guardian ad litem's not doing it. The female that's in possession of the child, whether it's the mom, the aunt, the grandma, whoever's got possession of the child, don't want the father to have the kid. There's nobody advocating for the father's rights. But it is actually the father's Fourth Amendment right to equal treatment under the Constitution. So the court is not supposed to allow biased behavior because it violates the father's Fourth Amendment constitutional right. Now, the father needs proper representation to enforce that, because if he has a lawyer, he's not allowed to speak on it on his own. He has to get rid of his lawyer before he can speak on it on his own. If his lawyer's not speaking on it on his own, the father is losing out on his right to fair, reasonable proceedings. He's also losing out on his right to a reasonable due process, because child custody cases are supposed to be resolved within 18 to 24 months. And you've got cases existing 8 years plus with no sign of resolution because the parties involved will not cooperate. They will not cooperate with the success of the father. And it is horrible, because if the parties are not in good faith working together for a positive resolution, then the judge has two enemies on opposite sides of the room waiting on the judge to split the difference. And while the state has responsibility to protect the children, overzealous monitoring over or intervention in family life can infringe on parental autonomy, because the fathers are entitled to parental autonomy. Lowering intervention thresholds where there are concerns that some state programs may be suitably lowering the threshold for intervention in family life, potentially violating the parent's rights, because there isn't any intervention stopping the father's deprivation of access to his child in the family life. A lot of the times we have situations where parties involved, including the judge, will reference, we're going to focus solely on the best interest of the child. And when those statements are made in court or out of court, your statement in that moment is you're ignoring the constitutional rights of the father. You're ignoring the parental rights of the father that have never been taken from the father. And you're going to make a unilateral decision that necessarily doesn't benefit the child, but it's easier for you to make a decision, because if you focus on what they tell you the child would prefer, then it makes it a lot. You're only going to disappoint one person, basically. But it's a horrible thing to do, because just like it is the child's experience of having access or not having access to their parent, it's also the father's experience. So you're devastating and destroying one person's life if the child is alienated from the father and taught to self-alienate. The product of alienation is equivalent to Stockholm syndrome from an assault victim that's been stuffed in a basement for 10 years. They're not going to want to escape from their captor. At the end of the day, the toughest part about that situation is that by doing what's in the best interest of the child and giving the child an atmosphere where the child has both the mother and the father involved, that requires them to make the tough decision and take the child out of an environment that will not allow the father to exist. And not a lot of courts have the courage or the skill set to make that type of judgment. But that is what is in the child's best interest, is to have the whole family as one family work together, or remove the child from the portion of the family that is not willing to cooperate. Usman says fathers are important. Moms would give a whooping, but the threat of a whooping from the father is a different type of fear. Yeah, that's true. But one thing's for sure, though, Usman, is that when a dad sits a child down and explains to a child why they shouldn't do something before the whippings occur, because typically when a dad gives a whooping, a dad has already sat the kids down and explained to them what he expects of them. This is what I don't want you to do. This is why I don't want you to do it. Now you know. Knowing is half the battle. G.I. Joe. But the next step is you still do it. Now, the consequences for you doing what I told you not to do after I explained to you why you shouldn't do it results in a whooping. The kids understand that the dad is not going to flex on his authority. Dad is going to, just like I tell you guys in relationships, stand on his non-negotiable expectations for behavior. And what this means is that if you don't do what I told you to do, the way I told you to do it, within reasonable flexibility, then there's consequences afoot. The kids have to abide by authority. Now, the mothers can manipulate the children with, bribery and other such, but that only goes so far. If you don't stand on non-negotiable expectations for behavior, when you start asking the children to do stuff simply because you say so, or simply because they believe that they're going to get something out of it if they do what you say, does not teach the children responsibility. It does not teach the children right from wrong. It does not teach the children how to exist and work in society. So dad gives more of a logical whooping. Dads give more logic and reason before he gives the whooping. Then it's dad's responsibility to give the whooping when there's a two-parent household. There are some mothers that give whoopings, but more often than not, the disciplinarian is expected to be the dad. So when mom says do something, parental reinforcement is mom telling dad that they're not listening to her. And because you're not listening to mom, mom's the first line of defense. Dad's the second line of defense. If mom says do something, you do it. If you don't do it, mom will go get dad. And when dad comes, dad's going to beat, because the reason why you're catching a whooping now is because he explained to you that you have to respect your mother and you have to do what your mother says. You're supposed within reason. So unless mom is being unreasonable, where if she's being unreasonable, I'll talk to her. But if whatever she's saying makes sense, you're supposed to do what your mother says. So because you're not listening to your mom, and mom comes and tells me you're not following instructions, that in and of itself is a whooping. That is a logical whooping, because logic dictates that dad sat you down and said, look, every time you don't do what your mom tell you to do, I got to come in here and I got to beat that ass. If you do what she say do first, then come and complain to me about what she did, then I'll go and talk to her and see if I can get her to not make you do that on a regular basis. We can negotiate this. But for you to just refuse to do what she tells you to do, that's not going to fly. If she gives you an instruction and you don't do it, I got to come in here and I got to bust that ass. I'm not asking questions now. She said do it. You said no. That constitutes an ass whooping. Now, let's put this as an adult's context. The exact same reason why this type of parenting works. The police say freeze. You say no. They say get on the ground. You say no. They hit you with the taser. You pull out the taser. They shoot you 5 times in the chest. If you would have stopped and cooperated with the authority figure in that situation when they first gave you instructions, you're sitting in handcuffs. You could talk to them now. You guys can work this situation out. Sometimes they take the handcuffs off and send you home with an apology. Sometimes they lie to you and try to make you understand why they fucked up. But at the end of the day, you live to go home and live another day. You frustrated, yeah, but by following the instructions of the authority figure, you don't get your ass whooped. So the whoopings as a child prevent you from catching whoopings as an adult. But if you follow the instructions dad said, which is listen to mom when mom gives instructions, then you don't get a whooping from dad on principle just because you didn't listen to the instructions. If kids could get this information in a flow chart, it could help out this generation a lot. Well, the kids in this generation don't have their dads. Most of relationships are breakups with less than 2 years. You have single dads all over the place. July 1st, 2023, there was a bill passed by the U.S. government that gave unwed fathers more right to their paternal rights, where that bill that got turned into law in July of 2023, almost 2 years ago, is now used for those single fathers who had children outside of wedlock to go get paternity and take up their parental rights and ultimately basically be put on child support, because the truth is that the courts still in 2025 are not pushing in favor of the fathers. So we have a huge issue that's still going unaddressed. And while we have a huge issue that's still going unaddressed, we have a lack of accountability, because it is not always the fault of the women that have possession of the child. There are some women that are just terrible. They use the children as a tool to manipulate and control the man. And then they use the child as a tool to punish the man when they don't get what they want. For example, those women that won't let the father see the child unless the father gives the woman more money for child support. He's already giving money for child support. He's doing the best that he can. He's on time with the amount that he brings. She wants more. The money isn't going on a child. The money's going on the standard of living of the mother. And if he doesn't submit to those demands, she won't let him see his child. You got to document these things. You got to keep a long laundry list of documentation as to how often you've tried to make contact with your child and how often you've been interfered with making contact with your child. You have to continue to push the envelope as to how you are going to address the scenario when you do get before a judge, because once you get before the judge, that's going to give the court the ability to make a decision that hopefully alleviates some of the disparagement. But you're going to have those documents of instances of state interference, document the instances of the mother's interference or the family of the mother's interference, consult with a lawyer if you can, file motions to enforce or modify custody orders. You actually might have to file a motion for civil contempt in the family court, where you are explaining the full totality of devastation that is happening, where your rights are being violated every which way. Like you are being fucked worse than both of those guys in a pawn shop in Pulp Fiction. And at the end of the day, the judge is supposed to stop that. But one of the issues that we have is that in family court, unlike civil court, in civil court and in criminal court, if the judge observes one of the parties unbecoming of the law, the court can take legal actions against that party without a motion being filed. In family court, the judge can see the parties screwing up and do absolutely nothing about it, because if the father does not file a motion for civil contempt or a motion for criminal contempt, which means that the parties who are in non-compliance of the court orders or negatively interfering with the parental rights are now put in jail for not complying with the instructions given by the court. And then with civil contempt, they can bail out of jail. With criminal contempt, they cannot. After a significant quantity of jail time, they can be released with fines in addition to jail time, which would be injunctive relief for the father for his rights being violated during this process. But it requires the father to have a judge with the competency and capabilities of processing such a case. And if the attorney doesn't do so, then the motion never gets filed. No actions gets done. If the attorney only files a motion to enforce means complain about what didn't get done, have the judge redemand that it gets done, and then wait and see what happens. But the consequences for not doing it the last time never happens. And if the attorney continues to file motions to enforce, never filing a motion for civil or criminal contempt, there is never any action taken, no actual action taken, where the court recognizes the father has never experienced relief for the full totality of the case. And the father is now asking for injunctive relief because for the first time, there is a motion on the table for civil, if not criminal contempt, where the father is asking for maximum penalty. That doesn't mean that you're going to get your kid. It just means that the people that are stopping you from having access to your kid might actually incur the belly of the whale style scenario until they get their shit together and start following the instructions of the judge. 1 to 5 people sitting in a holding cell and paying $500 worth of fines for non-compliance to a court order, more than likely after that, those parties are going to cooperate with the court. Now, it's a plus and a minus, because once somebody else gets hit with civil contempt, if you get caught in a crossfire of the judge giving instructions, you're going to have to comply with the court's instructions within a reasonable period of time, because if not, they're going to try to one-up you and hit you with a motion for civil contempt. So you're going to have to make sure, because this is a tit-for-tat situation. You're going to have to challenge unconstitutional state actions in court. And you're going to have to be as detailed as possible, maintain a level of calm composure, and hope that the emotional distress that you're under doesn't overwhelm you and have you start telling insignificant stories about this one time at band camp that is related to your claim, but it is unrelated to the argument that they fucked you over already and they need to be penalized for it. You're supposed to be clear and concise. You're going to have to advocate for clearer legal standards, and you're going to be looking for the demand for protecting the parental rights. And then you're going to have a situation where the courts apply stricter scrutiny when reviewing state actions that interfere with the fundamental paternal rights. You're also going to have to demand as the father that strict scrutiny and excessive consequences occurs to the mother and the mother's side of the family when their lack of action to the court orders, because court orders are directed to the active parties. If the mother lost custody and if the child is with the mother's family, they're not active parties, they're observatory parties. So it's really the state versus the father. But if the person in possession of the child is a relative and they're not complying to the court orders either, they're an observatory party that is interfering with the court order, which means that you have to remind the judge that the observatory parties must also be held in contempt for their lack of action with respects to the court's instructions, because the court's instructions are written in a vague, open-ended scenario so that the parties involved can work together in order to reach a solution in line with the outline of the judge's instructions. But if nobody's cooperating with the judge's instructions, you're going to have to really be very detailed. Now, fathers should be prepared to assert their constitutional rights to direct the care, custody, and control of their children when facing unwarranted state interference. But it's not always going to be the case. You're going to have situations where the judge will rule against you as the father, noting that you have concerns and objections to the judge's decision. That doesn't mean that you can flip the table and walk out of the courtroom. All that means is that the judge made note that they don't give a shit about what you had to say. They're going to do it differently because you have no say. Now, eventually, this is going to pile up because there is a motion to vacate that's filed when your rights are being violated, unjustifiable delays of due process occurs, your position in the case has been lost due to the unjustifiable, unreasonable delays, and a ruling no longer in your favor occurs because you have lost so much ground in the case that you lost your case because they drug the case out. That gives you the ability to overturn the judge's decision. It doesn't give you possession of your kid, and until the decision is overturned, the decision is in fact in effect. So whatever the consequences are, that's the consequences. You can just keep fighting it while everybody else gives up until the decision is overturned, and then everybody gets drawn back into the court. But if you're in that situation where you've got like a year left of childhood, by the time the ruling is overturned, the child is 18, where they have effectively stolen your child from you unlawfully. And the state of Florida or whatever state that you're in, Maine, New York, this happens a lot in New York, California, Delaware, your kid is just gone, bro. There are a lot of lawyers out there that'll tell you, oh, yeah, this isn't going to end in your favor. You should just give up and start over and just have more kids. Because men do not have the possibility of success. There is literally no possibility, but they're supposed to have equal opportunity. Now, moreover, men often face significant legal hurdles when it comes to fighting for custody because they may not have the same level of access to their children during the divorce proceedings or dependency scenarios, especially if the father was in a situation where he did not know the child existed and he was found as a result of the case. And then a DNA test confirmed that he was the father, and now he's involved in the case where he was otherwise not involved in the child's life because he did not have any knowledge that the child existed before the case. He has less rights in the case, even though he has equal right under the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, which can make it harder for them to prove their parenting abilities because they're never given the opportunity to prove their parenting abilities. They may also face discrimination from judges, lawyers, and other legal professionals who may hold bias against them due to their race and or gender, which has happened plenty of times. And on top of all this, men may face significant financial burdens when fighting for custody. They may have to pay for lawyers, court fees, and other expenses, all while trying to maintain a relationship with their children and potentially paying child support at the same time, where this can be a daunting task, especially for men who are already facing emotional turmoil. Now, when we look at the statistics, the practice becomes even clearer, because studies have shown that mothers are awarded custody in up to 80% of cases, while fathers are awarded custody around 10% of cases, and the remaining 10% are typically joint custody agreements. These numbers are staggering, and they suggest that men do face significant challenges when it comes to securing custody of their children, because in only 18% of custody cases, due to agreements that the father should have custody, that's the only time that it happens, because over 90% of custody cases are settled outside of court, with parents often deciding custody arrangements without judicial intervention. And you ultimately end up with the father getting 40 to 50, not even 50%, 30 to 40% of the time, where the mother might have the child 8 months out of the year and the father might have the child 4. At best. Sometimes it's less than that. Sometimes they only get the child for the holidays, for the summer break or something. Now, when fathers do fight for custody in court, which happens less than 4% of divorces, the statistics on their success rate is even lower, because in divorce court, the woman is going to make it seem like the man is so much of a bastard that he is a bad husband, ergo a bad father. So the father's reputation is going to be disparaged in the divorce because the woman wants to leave, but she wants to take the paycheck with her. So she's going to have the children in her custody when she divorces the man, so that she can demand alimony alongside child support, which is unethical. Because if you can't afford to give to parent the kids, he should have the kids unless he doesn't have the means to care for the kids. That is when a man should be paying for the care of the children because he doesn't have the time or the ability to care for the children. You do not want him to care for the children. You do not bill him for the children because he wants his kids. He can take care of his kids. He makes time for his kids, and you won't let him have it. So that's why we were talking about those statistics earlier with 60 out of 167 women being active judges in the judicial court, 33% of trial judges being women, 4 out of 9 women in Supreme Court, which is all ranging between 30 and 44% of them being women, where 4 out of 15 female judges are international judges, which is about 26.7%. And the African court of human and people's rights is 5 out of 11, which is approximately 45%. And the International Criminal Court is 8 out of 18, which is about 44%. So overall, we do have a decent quantity of female judges, somewhere between 30 and 40% globally from 2017, which is 35% increase from the 2008 level. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are many fathers out there who have successfully fought for custody of their children, and there are stories that are truly inspiring. I mean, take, for example, there was a man named John, a father who determined to be reunited with his daughter after a messy divorce. Despite facing significant opposition from his ex-wife and the legal system, John persevered, and eventually he was awarded joint custody, but it took him a substantially long period of time. The child has to not give up as well as the father in order for them to be united. And John's story is just one example of many. You can hear fathers all over the place. Like Father's Day is almost like the country celebrates Mother's Day like it's something to talk about. But truth be told, not taking no smoke from the moms. Father's Day should be like the celebration of warriors, because these men fight tooth and nail for their kids. Even if they don't have access to them, even if they don't have possession of them, they fight their entire lives for their children and their wives. And then the wives leave them because they're not satisfied, and the wives take the children away from them and make the children hate the father to make it easier for the wives to keep the kids. And the father has to live that life and then try to mend his relationship with his child as they are an adult, where he has lost out on the entire childhood. And he didn't do anything to the kid to cause that to happen. That's like the biggest hurt. And the fact is that Father's Day, like there, instead of just doing like a little barbecue and giving a dad a tie where dad's got to do the barbecuing, like it really should be valuing these fathers out here, because these fathers are really getting the screws put to them for the sake of the kids, and all of the sacrificing of the father. There are no fruits to the labors of this. It's just self-sacrificing. Hopefully, when the children grow up, hopefully those children recognize that the fathers never gave up, that the fathers continued to fight until there was absolutely nothing left to fight for. And even then, they continue to fight thereafter, because if they don't keep fighting, they lose the kids, and the kids will hate the father because he gave up. So the children are alienated from the father, where the alienated father is hated by the kids because he's trying to be involved in the child's life and he's not successful. Then the children are going to hate the father because he gave up. And even though this isn't the only story that's out there, you have to recognize that the systematic biases and legal challenges that men face, and working to create a leveling playing field being the most difficult thing to do, as well as see in a moment's time that we have a significant impact on the lives of the children as men, and we have significant impact on families everywhere. These men are very important. We understand that when they fight for custody, it is far from easy. The men face significant emotional, financial burdens, and at times it seems like the whole system is stacked against them. There are a lot of men that actually, single fathers, that are going through this situation, that the case results in the father's suicide because he never ever acquired his kid. He fought until he had no hope left and gave his life up because he did not have the ability to live his life with his kid, and he didn't want to live without his kid. That is terrible, that men are put through so much emotional turmoil that they in their lives because they cannot be involved in their child's life. In a society that calls men dirtbags and deadbeats because they're not actively in their child's life, but they're not outside of their child's life because they're deadbeats or because they don't want to be. They're not allowed to be. They're denied their rights to their responsibilities, which is unethical. And even though some parents refuse to give up, eventually their hard work, some of them, their hard work will pay off. But a lot of them, it goes unobserved. So when you look at the testament to the power of perseverance and determination, and recognize as a reminder that even in darkest times, there is always going to be hope, you have to look back on everything that we've talked about today and remember that it is clear that men do face a significant challenge when it comes to securing custody for their children. And ladies, if y'all have a kid and the dad doesn't live with the kid, y'all need to put forth more effort to bring the child to the dad. Drop them off by dad's house. Bring them to dad's job and let dad bring them home from work when dad gets off from work, and then come pick the child up as dad's on his way off to work. Something. Work it out. Figure out a way where even though y'all don't like each other no more, that don't mean that the kids don't get the chance to spend time with their parents, because the kids are entitled to have their parents and the parents are entitled to have their kids. And you should be able to put forth the effort necessary to make sure that the child is there with their dad, the same way a lot of us that grew up without our fathers wish that our dads were there. And a lot of us who grew up without our fathers used to blame dad for that. But you have to understand that if as adults now we recognize that our dads probably was kept away from us when we were growing up, the same way we're kept away from our children now that we're grown. It's a vicious cycle where broken homes and single families or children are growing up without their fathers. But when we look at how the boys that are turning into young men and the young men are turning out to be unfavorable for the societal expectations of men, because the young men are being raised by feminine upbringing, the men are becoming too feminine by the qualifications and expectations of women. But the women will not allow the men to take care of the children. The women will not allow the men to provide a masculine perspective of a well-respected man, or of a man that has the capabilities of respecting a woman and valuing a woman the way women believe that they should be valued and treated. Because a woman can teach a girl how to be a girl, even though they don't. They teach them how to be men, to what they expect a man to be. That's how they raise the girls. That's how they act. That's what they ascribe to be. But then they don't teach their sons how to be men. They teach their sons how to be simps, how to submit and obey. Then generations later, you have all of the men that are not masculine. They are not assertive. They submit to the women. And then the women are unattracted to these men because these men are not masculine. They're not assertive. They don't stand on principle. They are pushovers. They find this unattractive. But ladies, y'all raised these men to be this way. The men had no involvement in how the men turned out. The men can only mentor other men after the men become men, because if a man talks to a young man under the age of 18, y'all gonna treat him like he creepy. Y'all gonna treat him like he's grooming the child. But he should be mentoring that young man on how to behave as an appropriate and effective man in this society, where women would be proud to be seen with that man, would be proud to engage and interact with that man, and that man would be successful for his family. It's a two-party thing. I'm not saying that women need to stop raising children and that be a man's job. What I'm saying is that women need to share the responsibility with the men. Since the women want egalitarianism, The men want to parent the child instead of y'all having abortions and protesting in the streets, shaving half your head off like Britney Spears so that you have the right to take the Plan B pill and kill the child that the man wants. Why not give birth to the child and give the child to the man and let him do it on his own? Why not give the men a fair shake at being good dads? But by recognizing these challenges and working to create the more leveling playing field that fathers need, we are going to be able to create a more just and equitable system for all families, but it's going to take a long time. It's not going to change overnight. It's not, the law just got passed in 2023 and we're in 2025 and you haven't seen much change. You've seen a 4% increase on male paternity since 2008. 8% increase. That's not a lot. Out of almost 13 million, only 12.5 million are guys. So ladies, share the kid. Share the kid. If you share the kid, then you can get your hair and nails did and go out there and go to the strip club and whatever else that you want to do and live your best life. If you share the kid, give the responsibility to the father and let the father be the father that the child needs so that you can live your best life. Because why is he giving you extra money for a babysitter so that you can go out to the club when you could just give him his kid? So as we march through today's topic, this was a hard-fought topic, and I appreciate you guys for hanging out with me on this particular topic because we covered this and that and everything in between on this and that. And when situations don't make sense, I got to take the time to make it make sense. I got to map out the detrimental concepts so that you guys can understand that there's a lot more to it. We got a lot of females that woe is me on the show, and I'm like, bro, you're not the only person here. You guys feel like you're not being treated right in certain scenarios, and the guys feel like they're not being treated right in certain scenarios. But when the shoe is on the other foot, who is putting forth the conscious effort to try something different? Because as long as you ladies allow things to stay the way they are without putting forth the conscious effort to try something different, you're not going to see improvement. Expecting it to be the man's responsibility to change the way our society is, claiming that it's a man's world, but the women are supposed to run the country. I don't understand how the women can be in charge and the men be in charge at the same time. You're only going to have one group of majority authority, and then you're going to have a different group of minority authority. The minority authority submits to the majority authority, and that is how social structure works. If you are going to be the majority authority, then that means that your counterpart is going to be the minority authority, because you can't have two majority authorities in the same scenario. You can't have two leaders giving two different instructions to the same team. It doesn't work. Your offensive captain and your defensive captain are two different captains on the same football field, but the offensive captain only gives instructions to the offensive line because there's only one offensive captain. The defensive captain gives instructions to the defensive line because there's only one defensive captain. The defensive captain does not give instructions to the offensive team. The offensive captain does not give instructions to the defensive team. Those two leaders do not conflict with each other. In a relationship, the ladies cannot be in charge and expect the men to be in charge at the same time. When she wants responsibility, she can have it. But when she doesn't feel like it's her place to have responsibility, or she expects the man to take over that responsibility, she submits. But she should not demand and assert authority at will, at her own will. It should be discretionary between both parties in agreement. I recognize that you're better at this than I am. I'm going to let you take the lead. You recognize that you're better at this than I am. You're asking for the lead. In that scenario, we both agree that you could probably lead us better than I can. So, lady, lead us. That's how that works. Now, in the other scenario, when the females don't feel like they should even have to address the scenario at all, that's when it's the man's responsibility. When it is the man's responsibility, she should be able to submit to his authority until the responsibility of authority shifts to the other person. So whoever's in the authority, whether it's the male or the female, inherently ends up with the submission from the person that's not in authority. But you cannot be in authority if you are not doing collateral damage, if you are not paying the cost to be the boss. So if you're not a majority share investor in this relationship by either finances, resources, and or effort, because non-tangible expectations could put you in an authoritarian position as well, then you have not contributed to the relationship to be the authority. If you didn't contribute into the relationship to be an authority, you should maintain your position as a minority in the relationship, which also means that if you want to be kept, you want him to be generous, buy you all kinds of nice things, take you shopping, take you trips around the world, all this other stuff, massage your feet, whatever, and you don't have to apply yourself to your own gratification while you are his dependent for him to meet those financial expectations, you are to submit to his authority, which means when he tells you how to dress, you listen. When he tells you to be home before the street lights come on, you listen. When he tells you to get in there and do some of the household chores, you listen. Because if you are going to put him in the position to be the financial authority over the resources so that he can handle the operation, then that means that you are the dependent in that operation and you depend on his success, which means you follow his instructions so that you can aid him in his success of taking care of you. You can dictate terms along the way after you have made him successful. That gives him the ability to be open-minded to your concerns so that he can make adjustments to meet your expectations while still focusing on his primary objective at the same time. So if you guys got a story to share about your own experiences with child custody, please leave it in the comments down below. And if you want to learn more about family law and related topics, be sure to check out some of the new topics that we have coming onto the show in more recent times. I'm going to let you know on our way out, we have Higher Ground as our show song. We got a lot of compliments from the fans yesterday and the day before yesterday. So the more you guys come across it, the more you guys get a chance to find it. We have the link to it on YouTube where you can listen to it for free in the description. All of the songs are in there. We also have the links to where you can purchase them from Amazon Prime for download. In case you don't have access to the internet, you can still listen to the song uninterrupted if you download it to your cell phone. And likewise, if you're listening to the song and you have it downloaded onto your cell phone, a lot of the times you have between the iPhone and the Samsung that if you lose internet connection because you have the data stored on your cell phone, it typically switches over to offline mode and plays the song from the database and then switches back to online mode when you regain access to the internet. So your playlist can operate both on and offline if you have the majority of your playlist downloaded. So take that into consideration. With that being said, ladies, I'm going to tell you, as long as the situation doesn't make sense, I'm going to keep asking you ladies to please make it make sense. Remember that we're live 7 nights a week, as I told you a moment ago. We are going to be trying to kick off at about 10:30 Central Standard Time, 11 o'clock 11:30 Eastern Time, about 7:30 California time. And for those of you that are in Greenwich time and Universal Standard Time, that's about 4:30 a.m. for you guys. But we're not going to change that time. That's going to be pretty much when we start, maybe 5 or 10 minutes behind when I have to deal with these internet issues. But we're going to do it about that time. Daylight savings time is in a couple of weeks because while we're in the 23rd of February, daylight savings time is effective March 9th. That means that for those of us in America, in the Western culture, daylight savings time is going to have the show started about 9:30 because we are not changing the time zone. We're not changing with the daylight savings time. So when the clock moves forward an hour, 9 becomes 10. So that means 10 becomes 9. Which means that for the rest of the world, it'll still be 4:30 in the morning. But for Eastern culture, it'll switch over to 9:30 in the morning during daylight savings time. So just note that time shift is coming over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to remind you guys about it. We're going to have a little bit of a drag on it, but we're going to get it done because that means I got to start an hour sooner. And I got to readjust my entire calendar. So it is very inconvenient. Looking forward to when Trump does away with that. And just make note that outside of tomorrow's members only show that it's going to be talking, it's open to the public so everybody can come, but it's going to be doing questions and comments from the fans. Also remember that we're going to be talking about just about everything that's happened with Canada being taken over by the U.S. financially and any other changes that has occurred thus far in politics. We're going to be talking about that tomorrow. So we have a wide range of things to cover tomorrow, and our business and finance topics that we're going to be talking about on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I want you guys to stay tuned. Again, I want to thank you guys for the men that are here. We got about 69% of men on the podcast right now because we got a growing group of women. So I appreciate you fellas for staying strong on the podcast. Make sure you guys continue to like and subscribe. Do the membership. Share this with somebody that you know that can use it. Share it with somebody that you know that would argue against it, because I take all challengers, because I only go off of facts. And with that being said, I want to say thank you again for coming to This and That. I'm your host, Xander. I'm going to have another colorful outfit for tomorrow where we talk about this, that, and everything in between. I'll see you guys tomorrow night. Thank you very much.
Higher ground. Used to chase validation, now I validate myself. Building inner strength, putting doubt upon the shelf. No more unnecessary drama, no more wasted time. Climbing higher, constantly making my own climb. Standing on higher ground where excellence is found. My potential knows no bounds, raising the bar, breaking ground. My network is my net worth. Choose your company wise. Surround yourself with eagles, not with sheep in disguise. Every interaction is a reflection of my brand. Quality over quantity, that's my personal command. I'm not landing on higher ground where excellence is found. My potential knows no bounds, raising the bar, breaking ground. I'm not just living, I'm manifesting my vision, cutting through limitations with surgical precision. My expectations are my compass, my respect is my shield to mediocrity and chaos. I will never I'm not just living, I'm manifesting my vision, cutting through limitations with surgical precision. My expectations are my compass, my respect is my shield to mediocrity and chaos. I will never yield.